The village of Mbali was a place where wealth spoke louder than kindness, where fine garments and decorated huts determined a person's worth. Traders from distant lands passed through its bustling marketplace, their camels laden with spices, rare fabrics, and ivory. Drummers played rhythmic beats as women adorned in colorful beads carried baskets of goods atop their heads. Children ran barefoot through the dusty roads, their laughter blending with the calls of merchants selling their wares. Among the many villagers was Zala, a young woman known not for riches, but for her heart as wide as the great rivers. She had no gold, no fine silk to drape over her shoulders, but she carried something more valuable, kindness. While others in the village sought wealth, she sought ways to ease the burdens of those around her. She helped the elderly carry water, shared her food with hungry children, and spoke words of wisdom that even the elders respected. One evening, as the sun melted into hues of orange and purple, a stranger arrived at the village gates. He was old and frail, his tattered robe barely covering his thin frame. His feet, cracked and dusty from long travels, trembled with each step. He leaned heavily on a wooden staff, his weary eyes scanning the village with quiet hope. He stretched out a trembling hand, whispering, "Please, I ask only for a morsel of food, a sip of water." The villagers recoiled in disgust. The wealthy men turned away, their robes swishing as they hurried past. Market women clutched their baskets, muttering about misfortune. Children, imitating their parents, pointed at him and laughed. "Go away, old man," a merchant barked. "We have nothing for beggars here." The stranger sighed and lowered his hand. He turned to leave, his shoulders heavy with rejection, until a voice, soft yet firm, stopped him. "Wait." Zala stepped forward. Her simple dress was worn but clean, her eyes filled with warmth rather than scorn. Ignoring the whispers around her, she reached into the small satchel she carried and pulled out a piece of bread. It was not much, only a humble portion she had saved for her own meal, but without hesitation, she offered it to him. The beggar's eyes glistened with gratitude. "You would share with a man like me?" Zala nodded. "Hunger does not ask if one is rich or poor. All it knows is emptiness." The old man took the bread with shaking hands and ate slowly, savoring every bite. When he had finished, he straightened, his frail posture suddenly seeming stronger. He gazed at Zala, his eyes holding an unreadable depth. "You are different from the others," he murmured. "May the gods bless you, child. Great rewards come to those with pure hearts." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a village still laughing at him, and a young woman whose fate had just begun to change. The village of Mbali buzzed with excitement as a rumor spread like wildfire. It was said that a mighty but unseen king was searching for a bride, but unlike the rulers of old who sought beauty or noble lineage, this king's desire was different. His queen would not be chosen based on wealth, appearance, or family ties, she would be chosen based on her heart. The news sent the village into a frenzy. Every maiden dreamed of being the chosen one. Mothers rushed to prepare their daughters, dressing them in the finest fabrics, braiding their hair with golden beads, and adorning them with bracelets that jingled with every step. Fathers boasted of their daughters' beauty and grace, certain that the king's envoys would soon arrive to make a selection. Girls who once spent their days in the fields now avoided the sun, fearing their skin would darken too much. They practiced walking with elegance, speaking with sweetness, and smiling in ways they hoped would charm the unseen ruler. But in the midst of this feverish preparation, Zala remained unchanged. She neither adorned herself in fine garments nor spent her days wondering about a king she had never seen. While others dreamed of thrones and riches, she continued her simple routines, helping the elderly, tending to the sick, sharing what little she had with those in need. "Zala, why do you not prepare?" a girl from the village asked, adjusting the golden chain around her neck. "What if the king comes and finds you looking like a commoner?" Zala only smiled. "A good man will not choose a wife for her garments, but for her heart." The other girls giggled, dismissing her words as foolishness. After all, what was a queen without beauty? What was a palace without gold? But the beggar, the same old man who had once been shunned, watched from the shadows. He had remained in the village, though no one paid him any mind. He sat near the well during the day, listening to the eager chatter of the maidens. He leaned against the walls of the marketplace, observing how people fawned over wealth but turned away from those in rags. He saw how the villagers worshipped status and ignored kindness. He watched as some girls pushed past the elderly to display themselves before passing strangers, hoping they were the king's envoys. He listened as merchants offered their finest goods only to those who could afford them, but cast aside the hungry. And then there was Zala, the only one who still greeted him with a smile, the only one who still helped without expecting anything in return. The beggar stroked his beard, his eyes twinkling with secret knowledge. The villagers saw only an old man. They did not know that he was watching, listening, waiting. For soon the true test of hearts would begin. As days passed, the presence of the old beggar became a source of growing unrest in the village of Mbali. At first, people simply ignored him, turning their backs whenever he stretched out his trembling hands for food. But as time went on, their indifference turned to resentment. Misfortunes began to arise, crops withered under the harsh sun, an unexpected illness spread among the livestock, and a merchant's cart broke on the main road, spilling his precious wares into the dirt. The villagers, searching for someone to blame, turned their fury toward the beggar. "He is a curse upon us," shouted one of the elders. "Ever since he arrived, misfortune has followed." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. "Yes, he must leave. We cannot let him bring more bad luck." A group of men approached the beggar, who sat quietly by the well, sipping from a wooden bowl Zala had given him the night before. One of the men kicked over the bowl, spilling the water onto the dry earth. "Be gone, old man," another spat. "We do not need beggars bringing ruin upon us." The beggar looked up, his tired eyes holding no anger, only deep understanding. He said nothing as they grabbed his arm, preparing to drag him out of the village. Before they could take another step, a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Stop." The crowd turned to see Zala, her small frame standing firm against the mob. Though she had no wealth, no power, she stood unshaken in the face of their cruelty. "How can you cast him out like this?" she demanded. "Has he stolen from you? Has he harmed you? Or are you simply punishing him for being poor?" The elders scoffed. "Zala, do not be foolish. He is bad luck." "Then I too must be cursed," she said defiantly. "Because I will not let you drive him away." Ignoring their protests, Zala knelt beside the beggar, gently taking his hands in hers. They were rough, scarred from years of hardship. His feet were covered in dust, his robe torn and thin. She led him to her small hut, a modest home at the edge of the village, where she fetched a basin of water. Wordlessly she began to wash his feet and tend to his wounds. She wrapped fresh cloth around his hands, brought him warm food and gave him a place to rest. The old man watched her with quiet wonder. No one had ever touched him with such care. "You see with your heart, not your eyes," he said softly. "One day the world will see you as I do." Zala only smiled, unaware that she had just passed a test far greater than she could ever imagine. One evening, as the moon cast a silver glow over the quiet village, the old beggar sat beside Zala's small hut, watching her with thoughtful eyes. She had given him food, shelter, and kindness without asking for anything in return. Now he had one more question for her. "Tell me, child," he said, his voice warm yet curious, "if you were queen, what would you do?" Zala let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Me? A queen?" The idea seemed absurd. She had spent her life among the poor, sharing in their struggles. Queens were born into palaces, not mud-brick huts. But the beggar only smiled, waiting. Zala thought for a moment, then sighed. "If I were a queen, I would make sure no one goes hungry. I would build shelters for the orphans and widows so they wouldn't be left to beg on the streets. I would listen to the problems of my people, not just the wealthy but everyone. And I would remind the nobles that their power means nothing if they do not serve the people they rule." The beggar's eyes twinkled as if her words had unlocked something deep within him. He nodded approvingly. "A true ruler is not chosen by birth but by spirit," he said. "And a heart like yours is rarer than gold." Zala only chuckled again, assuming the old man was speaking in riddles. She did not know that her fate was already being written in the stars. Meanwhile, the wealthiest maidens of the village were in a flurry of excitement. The long-awaited grand event was approaching, a night where the unseen king's envoys would finally arrive to choose his bride. The maidens adorned themselves in the finest silks, their skin glistening with scented oils. Golden necklaces, ivory bangles, and gemstones decorated their wrists and necks. Mothers fussed over their daughters, whispering strategies to appear the most elegant, the most graceful, the most deserving of a royal title. Walk with poise. Speak with sweetness. Do not let your eyes linger on anyone of lower status. The entire village transformed into a stage for ambition and vanity, each maiden desperate to outshine the others. Among them, Zala remained unnoticed. She had no jewels to wear, no fine fabrics to display. She sat outside her hut with the beggar, sharing a simple meal of roasted maize and fresh mangoes. She did not know that while the maidens prepared for a king, the king was already beside her, watching, listening, and waiting. The sun had barely risen when the village of Mbali erupted into chaos and excitement. A royal procession had been spotted in the distance, its banners fluttering in the wind. Drums thundered, announcing the arrival of the king's envoys. The roads filled with people eager to catch a glimpse of the grand spectacle, warriors in gleaming armor, horses draped in rich fabrics, and noblemen carrying the emblem of the unseen ruler. The village chief and elders scrambled to prepare. They hurriedly gathered the wealthiest families, ensuring their daughters were properly adorned. The young maidens, dressed in their finest silks, stood poised and graceful, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Each one secretly prayed to be chosen as the king's bride. "This is our moment," the chief murmured to the elders. "One of our daughters will bring great honor to our village." Amidst the hustle and grandeur, Zala stood at the edge of the crowd, watching in quiet curiosity. Unlike the others, she had not prepared for this day. She had not dressed in gold, nor rehearsed words of charm. She had only come to watch, just as the beggar had promised. She turned her head, expecting to find the old man beside her, but he was gone. A strange unease settled in her chest. Where had he gone so suddenly? She searched the crowd, her heart sinking as she realized he had vanished without a trace. Had he been chased away again? Or had he left on his own? Before she could dwell on it, a hush fell over the village. The envoys had stopped in the center of the gathering. One of them, a tall man dressed in royal blue robes, unrolled a scroll and spoke in a commanding voice. "By the decree of the great king, we have come not to seek, but to announce." The villagers held their breath. "The ruler of this land has already chosen his bride." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispers filled the air. The maidens clutched their jeweled necklaces, glancing at one another in confusion. "Who is it?" someone dared to ask. The village chief straightened proudly, expecting the name of his daughter to be spoken. The wealthiest fathers puffed their chests, certain that the king could have only chosen a maiden of noble blood. But as the envoy's gaze swept over the crowd, it landed on none of them. Instead, it settled on a single figure standing at the edge of the gathering. The woman with the purest heart, the one who has shown kindness without expectation. She has already been chosen. The villagers turned in stunned silence. And then, before Zala could even process what was happening, the envoy raised his hand and pointed at her. A stunned silence settled over the village as all eyes turned to Zala. She stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. It had to be a mistake. She was just a simple girl. How could the unseen king have chosen her? But before she could even find her voice, a sudden gust of wind swept through the village, rustling the trees and sending a ripple through the crowd. The air itself felt different, charged with something ancient and powerful. And then the beggar stepped forward. The same frail man the villagers had ridiculed. The same man they had driven away, spat upon, and called a curse. The same man Zala had defended and sheltered. Only now, he was changing before their very eyes. His tattered rags shimmered, the fabric dissolving into threads of gold. His hunched frame straightened, revealing the proud stance of a warrior. The wooden staff in his hand twisted and lengthened, transforming into a scepter topped with a blazing jewel. His weathered skin glowed with newfound vitality, and his eyes, once dull and weary, now gleamed like the sun itself. Gasps filled the air. Villagers stumbled back in shock, some dropping to their knees. The beggar was no beggar. He was King Tafari, ruler of the vast kingdom beyond the mountains. The same king they had dreamed of serving. The same king they had hoped would choose one of their daughters. The same king they had mocked and scorned when he came to them in disguise. The village chief clutched his chest, his face drained of color. The wealthiest maidens, once so sure of their own beauty and worth, now trembled, realizing they had turned their backs on the one man who could have granted them everything. Zala, still breathless, stared at him in disbelief. "You," she whispered. "You were the king all along?" King Tafari smiled, his expression filled with warmth. "Yes," he said, "but I needed to see with my own eyes who among you held true kindness in their heart. Wealth fades. Beauty withers. But a pure heart, that is a treasure no riches can buy." He turned his gaze over the villagers, his voice gentle but firm. "You judged a man by his rags. You turned away one who had nothing, never once asking who he might truly be. But one among you, one single soul, showed me kindness without knowing who I was." He extended his hand to Zala, his golden robes catching the sunlight. "And now, Zala, I ask you, will you stand beside me as my queen?" A heavy silence hung over the village as King Tafari's words settled like thunder in their hearts. One by one, the villagers fell to their knees, their heads bowed in shame. The same hands that had once pointed at the beggar in disgust were now clasped in pleading. The village chief trembled, his pride crumbling beneath the weight of his mistake. He had paraded his daughter before the king's envoys, believing wealth and status would earn his favor. But it was Zala, the orphan girl with nothing to her name, who had been chosen. "Forgive us, great king," an elder pleaded. "We did not see. We did not know." The wealthiest maidens, once full of vanity, clutched their jeweled necklaces as if they could shield them from their shame. They had spent their days chasing gold and admiration, yet the one who had given with an open heart, without expecting anything in return, was now adorned in royal silks. King Tafari studied them in silence. His face was not cruel nor angry but solemn. "You judged too quickly," he said, his voice strong yet calm. "You looked upon a man in rags and saw only worthlessness. But the gods do not measure men by gold, nor do they honor those who value only themselves." The villagers trembled, expecting punishment. But the king did not speak of vengeance. "Your hearts were tested," he continued, "and now you must live with the lesson. Let this day be a reminder to you all, greatness is not found in riches, nor does nobility come from birth alone. A crown means nothing if the heart beneath it is empty." The villagers nodded fervently, murmuring promises to change. They knew that no words could erase their actions, but perhaps in time they could learn to see the world as Zala did. And then all eyes turned to her. She was no longer the girl in faded clothes and worn sandals. She stood beside the king, draped in royal garments, her hair adorned with golden beads, her presence radiating a quiet strength. But even in her newfound splendor, her heart remained unchanged. She stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the village. "True wealth is in the heart, not in gold," she said. "A person's worth is not measured by what they wear, but by what they give." Her words cut through the air like a divine decree, leaving the villagers humbled and silent. King Tafari turned to his people once more. "Let this be the law of my kingdom. Kindness, not vanity, will be the measure of true nobility." The village had learned its lesson. And Zala, once a simple girl, was now their queen, not because of her beauty nor her birth, but because of the richness of her spirit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the vast land, Zala embarked on her journey to the hidden kingdom. Escorted by King Tafari and his royal guard, she left behind the village that had once been her world. The familiar dusty paths and humble huts faded into the distance, replaced by a breathtaking land of wonders beyond her imagination. Towering mountains kissed the sky, their peaks shrouded in mist. Rivers of crystal-clear water sparkled, winding through emerald-green valleys. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers, and trees heavy with golden fruit swayed in the wind. Zala gasped in awe. She had never seen such beauty. At the heart of this paradise stood the Golden Palace, an architectural masterpiece carved from ancient stone, adorned with intricate gold patterns that shimmered in the sunlight. The throne room was vast, its ceiling a masterpiece of painted stars, and in the center stood the legendary Golden Throne, where only the purest of heart could sit. The people of the hidden kingdom, having heard the news of their king's choice, gathered in celebration. Their cheers echoed through the halls, welcoming their new queen. Unlike the villagers, they did not judge her by her past nor by her clothes. They welcomed her for who she was. The grand coronation began. Dressed in robes of silk and gold, Zala stood before the kingdom, her heart pounding. The high priest, an elder with wisdom in his eyes, held out the crown of the golden throne, a delicate yet powerful symbol of leadership. King Tafari took her hands in his and smiled. "This is your moment," he said. "You have always been a queen in spirit. Now you shall be one in name." With those words, the high priest placed the crown upon Zala's head. The people erupted in joyous shouts, drums pounding in a rhythmic melody of unity and celebration. Petals rained from above, carried by the wind like whispers from the gods themselves. And so, Zala became queen of the golden throne. She did not rule with vanity, nor did she crave riches. Instead, she reigned with compassion, wisdom, and humility, remembering always that true power lay in kindness. Under her rule, the kingdom flourished. The poor were no longer cast aside, the weak were protected, and the arrogant learned that greatness was not inherited but earned. Word of her reign spread far beyond the hidden kingdom, reaching even the village that had once mocked her. She had been a beggar's only friend, and now she was the queen of a mighty land. But even as she sat on the throne, wrapped in royal robes, she remained the same Zala, the girl who once shared her last piece of bread, the girl who believed that kindness was worth more than gold. And so began the reign of the queen with a heart of gold. The reign of Queen Zala and King Tafari became a golden age, one that would be spoken of for generations. Under their rule, the kingdom flourished like never before. The fields were rich with harvest, the rivers flowed freely, and the people lived in harmony, knowing that their leaders saw them not as subjects but as family. Zala, now adorned in royal robes, never forgot her roots. She walked among the people, listened to their struggles, and ensured no one was ever turned away in need. The palace gates, once guarded fiercely, were now open to all. The beggars, the wanderers, the lost, all were welcomed with kindness. No one was judged for their rags nor for their past. Every soul was seen for their heart, just as Zala had once seen a king hidden beneath a beggar's disguise. And so, the story of Queen Zala and the wise king spread across the lands. Travelers from distant kingdoms came to witness their rule, carrying the tale with them to foreign lands. The story became a lesson told by elders to their children, a song sung by village griots, a fable whispered by mothers as they rocked their infants to sleep. Never judge a soul by its appearance, they would say. For even a king may walk in rags, and the greatest treasures are found in the purest of hearts. Even the once proud villagers who had mocked the beggar now told the story with reverence. Their shame had become their wisdom, and they taught their children never to make the same mistake. Their tongues, which once spoke cruel words, now spoke lessons of compassion. And so, the name Zala became more than that of a queen. It became a symbol. A symbol of kindness, of wisdom, of the truth that power is not in wealth or status, but in the courage to love and the strength to see beyond what the eyes perceive. As the years passed, King Tafari and Queen Zala ruled with unwavering justice and mercy. Their love for their people only grew, and their people in return loved them more than any rulers before. And though time would one day carry them away, their story remained, etched into the soul of the land. The golden throne they once sat upon would be passed to another, but their legacy, the lesson of a beggar turned king and a girl who saw with her heart, would live forever. And so, the legend of Queen Zala and King Tafari was told for generations, carried on the wind like a sacred song. Fathers told it to their sons, mothers whispered it to their daughters, and elders shared it by the fire, their voices rich with wisdom. It was a story that lived not just in words, but in the very hearts of the people. In distant villages, where once men and women turned away the needy, they now remembered Zala's kindness. In mighty kingdoms, where rulers once judged by wealth alone, they now sought advisors with wisdom, not just riches. The lesson of the beggar king and the kind-hearted girl reshaped hearts, teaching that greatness is not found in crowns, but in compassion. Even the gods themselves smiled upon their union, for it was not born of greed nor ambition, but of pure and honest hearts. They had tested Tafari and Zala, disguising power in rags and virtue in simplicity, and they had been pleased with what they found. Their blessing remained upon the land, ensuring that kind rulers would always rise, that the kingdom would never fall into the hands of the vain or the selfish. And so, the final message of their tale echoed across time. Greatness is not in gold nor in thrones, but in the kindness we show to others. For even the poorest hand, when extended in generosity, is richer than the finest palace. And even the most powerful ruler, without love for his people, is poorer than the humblest beggar. And so, the tale of Zala and King Tafari lived on, a beacon for all who would listen, a lesson for all who would learn.